Hey crafters, Big D here, and this week we are building some abandoned wooden fortress pieces as used for terrain in Warcry and Kill Team. They're specifically designed for Warcry, but they'll be perfectly usable for Kill Team as well. Now this is going to be a multi-part video as well, because this first one is just us actually building the structures themselves. The next video will be some of the other scatter terrain go with them, and then we'll do an entire video on detailing them, paint and setting them up and whatnot. So for this first one, we're just building the basic structures. Now, a couple things to note. There's no foam. There's no anything other than wood. We're just using a couple different kinds of wood, which I'll show you when we start off. And we're putting everything together using super glue and baking soda. This makes a really nice, firm, almost resin-like bond in the wood. You can use wood glue, you can use white glue if you want. I really like the super glue and baking soda mixture. You put the glue on and then you use the powder to kind of get in there. The nice thing about super glue is that it has a capillary action when it goes into wood. So it sinks in. So when you put the powder on it, it just really bonds the pieces together really well. Now, one of the things to note when you're working with this much super glue, and I do mean this much, because in building my 4 pieces that I built for just this set, I bought from Dollar Tree, I buy these bottles of super glue, and I get 2 of these bottles in a $1 pack, and these are, I think the 2 of them together end up being just over like 1.5 ounces of super glue. I went through 8 bottles making this stuff. You go through a lot of super glue making these. So going to Dollar Tree and getting a big pack of these 2 bottles for 1 super glue, that's a good thing. The other thing is when you're using them, any type of baking soda will use it. 1 box of baking soda will last you forever. You're not using tons of the powder. But you're going to want a vacuum cleaner or something afterwards to vacuum up, because you're going to have a lot of dust afterwards. You want to vacuum it up because it does leave a residue everywhere. The other thing is when you do this, you want to be in a large ventilated room or have a fan or a respirator or something, because the chemical action between the 2 of them does make a little bit of an odor. I'm in a very big room, and I had a fan going after I would do any one big piece. So make sure you do that. It's just for safety purposes. Also, you'll be doing a lot of trimming. You're going to need a heavy-duty knife. Always, when you're working with a heavy knife like this, you're always cutting away from yourself and blade up and away. You don't want it ever pointed towards your skin. So, things to remember. Also, if you get super glue on your skin, rallying alcohol will get it out. So, that's another thing to remember. So there's my safety warnings. There's the tools you need. We're going to come back and we're going to show you the materials we're using and start our construction phase. So let's hit the table. Okay, crafters. So for our Savage 4, we are working in wood. Want to do something different. So all of our main building materials today are going to be wood and some very fine twine. So let's start off with our logs, the uprights that are going to be the main basis of our fortress here. So we're going to make these look like logs. Now the biggest problem with when you buy dowels like this, these are really nice, 12 pack of 6-inch dowels for $1 at Dollar Tree. These are really nice because they're a nice sturdy wood. They're not balsa, but they're very uniform, which we don't want. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut these up. Since these are uprights, and we know by looking at our other Warcry and Kill Team terrain that 3 inches is where our deck is going to be. We want these to be a little taller, so we want these to be about and around 4, a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. They don't need to be uniform. They just need to be around 4 inches. So you're just going to take your spot where it's about 4 inches, take a pair of heavy-duty cutters, and you're going to cut them off.
All right, now this is where the pencil sharpener comes in. We're going to trim this back a little bit. We don't want a sharp point, but we want this to look like a rough hewn log. So you just get a little bit to take that edge off there. Then we're going to take a heavy-duty knife, and always cutting away from you. You're going to just take a little bit of the knife out, and you're just going to chip out some spots, grab some divots, and we're just trying to make this not a perfect rounded piece. Alright, so now we got a log. And now the other thing we can do is we want to draw some lines or cracks in it, or some deep pieces of wood grain. You're going to just take a sharp ballpoint pen and just kind of draw into the wood. This works better on flat pieces, but you can do the same thing. And again, you're trying to represent cracks and deep gouges in your wood. Now these won't show up in the dark ink once it's painted, but you will see the marks. Alright, now we have a log. Nice upright piece. So you're going to want to get at least a pack of these. It's 12. I would say get 2 packs and do this to the entirety of them. When you clip off the other part, don't throw this away. We're going to use this elsewhere in the build. So these are nice little 2-inch stubby pieces. These will make really nice logs for a couple different points. So keep the pieces you cut off and go and rough up and make a bunch of these posts. Okay, crafters, so we're back with the second part. And again, we're back to the Dollar Tree. We got a pack of these, the 60 pack of these larger craft sticks or popsicle sticks, and we got a bigger count of these smaller ones. Now the reason I like the really cheap smaller ones is they still have a lot of wood grain in them showing, so we don't have to do as much weathering with these, which is really nice. With these larger ones, we're going to do these basically the same way, so it's just about size. For these larger ones, actually for both of them, you're going to cut off roughly the bottom tab. And it's okay if you snap it and make some nice little wood grain pieces in the end there. Do the same thing with these to nicely square them out. So you got nice square-ish logs or planks. And then for the rest of it, for these, for the bigger ones, since these are going to be your palisade walls, you kind of want to do these again like your logs, somewhere between 4.5, somewhere around there. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to kind of grab a piece and we're just going to snip it off, flex it off, and we get a nice plank. And then just like we did with the logs, we're gonna go with the grain and we're gonna accentuate that. When we do the painting, will be picked up by the detail paint we do. So don't be gentle with these. You want to really take this pen and really draw these lines in so you can feel them. You're also going to take, again, cutting away from yourself, you're going to take the edge of this and you're just going to chip off and scrape away some of these perfect edges because you want these to look a little rough hewn and weathered. You're probably going to want to crank out a good 20-30 of these at least, probably a lot more. Probably going to go through most of a pack to make these pieces of terrain. So go ahead and crank out a bunch of these. And then you're doing the same thing with these, but these are mainly going to be running planes. So people that, you know, the floorboards on the upper levels. So in this case, you're pretty much just going to snip them off. And recognize that when you're making your floor pieces, you're going to be willing to cut some of these down or snap them and roughly snap them to fit, to look like rough, harsh floorboards or cracked boards, or support boards when you'll trim some like this way and making them be upright supports that run at an angle. And again, you're just going to get rid of some of these perfect manicured edges. And there we go. We've got some logs. These look a lot different when they're painted. So go ahead and weather these up, get a bunch of these put together, and we're going to come back and look at the last pieces we need before we start putting our fortress together. So the last thing we're going to talk about are these guys. Now we got some shish kebab skewers, the bigger, heavier duty ones. And we've got some bamboo coffee stirrers. I grab these at Starbucks. I go and get a cup of coffee. I grab a handful of these every time I go in. I've got a box of them now. For these, you're not going to be able to really draw the lines. If you try drawing the lines on those, you're just going to snap them and rip them into little pieces. So you're going to want to cut some of these edges and trim some of these edges just to make them look a little bit more roughed up. But the reality is, these are going to be cut to size. So I wouldn't worry too much about trimming those ends until you know your exact size you're putting these in, because these are going to be cross beam supports, and these are going to be pieces to make things look more ramshackle. The same goes for these. We're going to be using the tips to look barbed, and we're going to be using these lashed together in groups. We're also going to use them lashed in for taller supports or little barb pieces like snapped together looking like a defensive position. So these are going to be, again, these are going to be cut to size. If you're not using the tips and you need more tips, go ahead and just stick them in a pencil sharpener, take them and sharpen them up once you've got them cut to size. Again, you're just going to be using, you need to have a pack of these handy for when you're working on things, and you're going to want, you know, a couple of handfuls, 20-30 of these nearby, again, just for handy. These are going to be, again, these are both going to be just cut to size and trimmed up to not look so perfect when you put them in place, but it's the same concepts. So again, and we're working in wood because we're trying to do something different and kind of stretch our boundaries. That's what this is all about. So shish kebab skewers, bamboo stirrers, the two kinds of popsicle stick, and we've got our dowels. So we're going to take those, we're going to weather those up, chip these up a little bit, and then we're going to start building. We'll be right back. So the main thing when you're building any sort of structure is that if you're going to be repeating it or making a set, you want things to look pretty close to identical, or at least a nice matching. So in this case, we've built a jig because we're going to be building a number of this piece of structure that we're going to be building everything else off of. I've also found that building them this way makes it easier to get consistency. So I built a jig using a heavy carpenter square, and I've got two pieces of tape to keep my dowels from rolling around. I've got one dowel set right at the beginning of the square, and I've got the second dowel that I'm setting right just at the 3-inch mark. Now I made a few of them, so unfortunately this tape is already starting to get unsticky. Now I've also got this upper row of tape right at the 3-inch mark up. And that's kind of key here, because you want this upper row, you want the top edge to be at 3 inches. Upper has to be at 3 inches. The lower one, you want to just below the bottom, just above the bottom, not right on the bottom. But the whole reason you're doing this jig is so that the bars that do the uprights are even, so they'll stand up nice and square. And then, just to make sure everything's nicely sealed together, you're going to do a top of glue on each end. And then just take a tiny pinch of baking soda and lay it on there. And that'll cause it to instantly cure and create a almost plastic-like substance that will seal the glue up. And as you can see, this is what you end up with. It takes 2 of these and 2 just over 3-inch pieces of the small popsicle stick to make these. For each major piece of wall, which you're going to be making at least 2 of those, you need 3 of these. For the dilapidated gate, which we'll also be making, you're going to need 4 of these, 2 for each side. And then for the corner, you're going to need 4 of these. So make all of these, and then we'll show you how we detail them before we assemble them together. So go ahead and make like a dozen of these pieces, and we'll come back. When we come back, you're going to want to grab your very thin twine. Now, we were talking about detailing our little cross hatches. Now, this is not required, this is not necessary. You certainly don't have to. This is one of those little touches that I might even not do on every piece, but I'm going to do it in a couple spots. And this is just to make it look how this thing was constructed, other than, if you don't want to bother and going through and putting nail holes or peg holes, and you're just worried about the glue. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how we use a little bit of twine here to make this look like these pieces are lashed together. So again, you're going to just take your twine, and you want to find enough twine that looks like scale rope. And you're going to wind it twice that way, and then come around and wind it twice that way. And then just tie it off as a knot. And then just take a drop of super glue and drop it right across the back of it. And again, we're just doing this light dusting just to get everything together. And now that's not coming off. And now you've got this nice tied on piece here. You just trim this off here, let your pieces hang. And you got your lashings on there. And you can do this in a couple places. You can do it on all 4, or you can just do it where you want to make it look like the ropes are still intact. now you've got a nice lashing showing how boards are held together. Now, you can do it to all of them. I may or may not. I'm going to probably do it to a couple here and there for looks. I might put some halfway on ones and then just glue them in place so they look ripped up and broken. There might be some I completely leave it out entirely. But it's just a nice little extra detail just to add some visual interest to the pieces as you're doing them. When we get to some of the barricades that we're going to do, we're definitely going to be using some more of this twine, so we'll come back to this. But it's just nice that we have a roll of it because we can do this as much or as little as we want on here. Other things you can do to add some visual interest is on some of these upright boards. If you have a split or you have a crack, even if you fixed it with glue, you can just take it and wrap it with the twine. And there you go. You batter down some rope just to add some visual interest, something to dry brush across. And again, we're adding some more visual interest, which is always key with these kind of pieces. Something to just make it look interesting. This twine will serve you well if you're using it in all of this project. Lashing pieces together, lashing boards together, interweaving it between floorboards, just really going for that ramshackle put together look. So let's get to the construction now, and we're going to put together our first piece, one of the walls. All right, crafters. So we're going to start off by building our first basic piece, a wall. In a set, I think I'm going to build 2 of these. So for each of these, you're going to need 3 of these structures we built, and then you're going to need, a handful of these, like we talked about. And I thought these were 6 inches long. I remeasured them when I started, and I realized they were a little too short. So I went and got some tongue depressors, and I actually physically snapped them down so they're not as wide, because I didn't want the full, really wide ones. I just kind of snapped them off kind of roughly, so they're not perfect, which is okay. And I drew some lines on one of them. I might do it on a couple others, just to kind of make them not look so uniform. But a lot of this is going to be covered up, so I realize this isn't that critical because it's going to be covered up by other boards being glued on it. So you want them longer than 6 inches because you want to be able to mark a center point, and then 3 inches out from each side you want to put a mark. So that makes them 6 inches wide, because 3 inches is pretty much the sweet spot for terrain for Kill Team and for Warcry. So we're going to start off building these the same way you built these, but we're going to be putting the lines right on the boards, or right on the posts where we glue them. So again, we're just going to use a little bit of glue. Put it right on the board there. And to make things easy, because we want everything nice and square, we're just going to put a little dab of glue right there, and then just grab some powder, and if you want to reinforce it, just drop another drop in there, and another pinch of baking soda right on there. And now that's firmly in place. And then you're going to do the same thing with the other end, but you want to make sure the bars are on the outside. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put it flat down, put it right on the edge, a little drip of glue, nice and firmly in place. A little twisting the boards. It's not perfectly even, but it's good enough for what we're doing. So in this case, we're going to put a little glue right here. I'm going to put this third one in place. Triple glue there. Same thing on the opposite side. And now we have the beginnings of our structure. Now we're going to take another one of these boards and we're going to put the same thing here to create, again, a strong, stable front to put our planks on. And there you go. We got our base structure. Now we're just going to put some planks right on the front. So all we're going to be doing is taking our planks and gluing them right in the front, but so that they don't go beyond the bottom of the ground there. So and then if you want to reinforce it, just drop in between the boards and then a gentle dusting. And I got a nice looking palisade wall. Now I want to add some walkways on there. Now for this, remember I said we're going to be cutting some of these to size. In the case of this, we're just going to grab some coffee stirrers and you're just going to glue a few down and then trim them to size. You can also use some of those other half of the tongue depressors you snapped off to give some nice variation in the boards. The big thing with the coffee stirrers, you just want to take off that nice rounded edge. But again, you're just running a bead of super glue and you're just laying some boards down. And if for whatever reason it doesn't stick, we're back to the glue on the back end. And the baking soda to make it stick. And you're going to do this all the way across to make a nice rough looking floor. So let's get these last ones in place and we'll come back and we're going to look at a done piece. So as you can see, here's our basic construction piece. And this is just a basic wall. This will be a nice blocking piece of terrain. People can't see and shoot through. They'll be able to go up top. And if it is a little uneven, like unfortunately mine is, all you got to do is set down some wax paper, put it on the wax paper, and then take a glob of hot glue and put it around one of the feet or the 2 feet that are up until it looks like a pile of dirt or whatnot. Sprinkle some sand and some super glue on it to get it, lock it all down. And then when it dries, you pull it off the wax paper and it'll be nice and solid and even. And it just looks like you've got, again, more abandoned. Because remember, the whole idea is that this is supposed to be an old ramshackle and abandoned piece. So, and if you want this to look more ramshackle, you can go in and you can take your pair of clippers and you can snip off a corner, or you can grab a piece and just break it off. And don't really worry about what chips free, just to make it look more roughed up. That's okay. And you see you've got it nice and solid. This is nice sturdy construction. The baking soda and glue really make like a plastic like piece for it to stick together. So I'm gonna put a glob underneath here, make this look nice and firm, and this will be good. Now this is a basic wall. You can also build a corner piece, and you would take the exact same thing and just put another piece here. Take one of these side walls and again go across like this and across the bottom over the top of this, and then put some more of these on the side here, and then you've got a corner that'll block terrain on two sides. So you want to build a couple of these. You probably want to build at least one corner, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're going to build the broken gate. So we're going to grab some more of these and come back and we're going to build our gate. Okay, crafters, so we're building this gate. So the idea is we're going to have two structures kind of like this. I've already got one started. So we're taking two of these and we're making sure they're facing outwards. This is going to be the two sides. This is going to be the front. We're going to put two regular, again, the 3-inch ones, just like the ones we have here on the sides, but we're going to put them on the front right above the two notches we have there. So we're just going to take one and just kind of hold it, put a drop of super glue there. You'll notice that the capillary action will flow right behind the wood. Just take a little bit of the powder and it immediately seals on. Then you do the same thing. In this case, you can just kind of lean it on there. So you want to take your second stick, and again do the same thing. Now you've got a nice solid structure. Then you're just going to take some of your boards and you're going to glue them on the front just like we did with the wall. And this is why I told you to make a bunch of them, because that's 5 for this, it's another 5 here. I've already gone through all the ones I've made, and we're going to need a bunch more. So I'm going to glue these 5 on the front, again making a palisade wall. And remember, the add piece you added on has to be the front. So let's get these on here, and then we're going to turn them, and I'm going to show you how we build a gate out of them. Okay, so we've got a bunch of our boards. Now, we've cut these that were just over 4 inches long, so they're the same height as these. Now we've taken the same boards and we've cut a bunch that are 3 inches tall, no more than 3 inches, so they get to the bottom part of this here. We've taken the other half of those and we've clipped them and flattened them out as well, because we're going to use them for another part on this build. So this will work out. But you're basically going to put your row of 3-inch tall boards and create an inner wall. You have to decide where your inner wall is. So in this case, I like this tie part, so I want to leave that on the outside. And I like these tie parts, I want to leave that detail out. So we're going to glue a series of these across here and a series of these across here, so we create a pair of small corners with a low wall here. And then we're going to put our floorboards across here. So glue these short pieces here, form your wall, and glue your floorboards down, and then we're going to join the whole thing up and show you where that goes from there. And here we have our two gate corners. We need to get the floorboards down, and then we can join the two. So let me get the floorboards down, and we'll show you how we turn them into a single gate. Okay, so we've got the two halves of our gate, and now we have to make a decision. Do we want to glue them as one solid piece, or as two pieces that come apart with a piece that lifts off the middle? The easiest way to make this decision is, do you want to have one big piece, or do you want to have it even more modularity? If you want more modularity, instead of gluing, we've taken one of the long ones and just cut off the edge corners. If you want to have modularity, all you're going to do is you're going to take two of those spikes from these when we cut them off, you're going to sharpen them, and then you're just going to glue them to the inside. Use a lot of glue and a lot of powder to make sure that they're nice and firmly in place. And you'll see there's a slot here, and that'll keep them in place. So you just drop it down and it locks the two pieces in place. Otherwise, you're just going to glue it down. Now, for my set, I want this glued down. I want to have this gate as a set piece. So we're just going to lay them flat so we have it measured. And I want it so it's firmly in one. We're going to glue it down on the one side. But you notice we're not gluing this side here. We're not gluing it because we want to make sure it's upright when we glue it, or we're going to have problems as if it weren't laying in case it's just not perfectly flat. Nice wedge down. Another drop here, right where it meets, and then a little bit of that capillary action, and it's firmly in place. You take the second one, lay it on, and you're going to count more on the capillary action here. So, drop of glue, now that it's in place, lay it down. Another drop of glue, count on that capillary action again. And then those pieces that we cut off, we're going to glue on, and we're keeping them so they're not going above the top of the gate. And we're just going to run a line of them across here. And if you want to really make them fancy, you want to hack some rough spikes into the top. But make sure they're rough. They're not sharp, perfectly put together pieces. And then lay them down and glue in place. And then you can use one of the walkways to go over here, or you can actually glue some pieces down. I'm going to use a removable walkway there for my set. But now you've got a couple of walls, you've got this, you got a corner, and you've got a really nice set to start with the terrain. the next step after building your pieces is to start building some barricades and some obstacles and some scatter terrain to go with you. We're going to cover that in next week's video. So take what we got here, build your set, build as many of these pieces you're going to want. Again, I want 2 walls, I want 1 corner, and I want 1 of these. And 4 nice sized pieces of terrain. That'll be good for a Warcry board. So we got this going on, and we're going to come back next week and we're going to come up with some smaller scatter barriers and a nice spike barrier to throw down here to impede people's way from coming in and out of that gate, and a few other nice pieces, along with some ramps, some stairs, and some other ways to get from piece to piece. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Game on!